Troy,
No.
you probably heard us. We're talking about Demaryius Thomas. Give me the positives and negatives out of this whole thing, and how do you think it's going to be resolved, and how soon?
Well, I doubt that it's resolved anytime soon, Les. The positives for the Broncos you mentioned, it's going to lead likely in June to more reps for Cody Latimer, perhaps even Emmanuel Sanders, Bubba Caldwell, Jordan Norwood, those guys. The negatives would be in learning a new offense, even with similar terminology. When they're implementing the offense, you would like Demaryius Thomas to be there, even though he has adapted to 3 different head coaches and different coordinators, so this wouldn't be the first time he's had to do this. The Duke thing really for me means absolutely nothing. I mean, it's voluntary, and he doesn't need to regain any timing with Peyton Manning. But if he's not there in June when they're implementing the offense, then obviously that can begin to set him back. My concern, Les and Woody, is that he's a sensitive guy. We saw last year at times when he had a lot on his mind, he did not play his best football. He said it wasn't his contract, but whatever reason, in the first game of the season, last game of the season, he did not play it particularly well. He's a great receiver, a great talent, but will this linger if it ends up with him playing under the franchise tag? And I think that is a genuine concern for fans and perhaps even teammates. What Demaryius Thomas will they be getting back if he doesn't agree to a long-term deal?
Do you think it's possible? I can't remember the last guy that was franchised twice, but they could franchise him again next year.
They could. I just don't think, Woody, if this doesn't go well, that they would do it again and go through all of this. I'm not saying a lot of drama, but as I've learned covering the NFL again this past year, they absolutely do everything to eliminate distraction. And the franchise tag can become a distraction if the player is going to miss, even though they're voluntary, even if he's going to miss time a second consecutive year, it's much harder to see him doing it. Now, they could. And you can certainly make the argument it's better to lease a player like Demaryius Thomas than to buy, because it's going to take more than $30 million guaranteed. It's going to take probably to be the second highest paid receiver of all time, and it's not going to be easy. If Dez Bryant would ever get done, I think you would see Demaryius Thomas get done. Dez Bryant's contract not getting done, switching agents to Rock Nation and Jay-Z, really, in my opinion, slowed this process.
It's almost a case, I would think, when Les asks you if this is going to drag on, that it's whoever bites the bullet first, whether it's Dez Bryant or whether it's Demaryius Thomas, that when one gets a contract, the other one's going to want a contract just exactly like that or for $5 more. It was sort of like, to me, the Patrick Peterson situation that happened last year.
Well, you think DT should be paid more than Dez Bryant?
I would pay them both about the same.
Yeah.
I mean, I would think that they're both in the same category. Would you agree, Troy?
I would agree, Woody. They're similar players. Dez Bryant is better at, the 50-50 ball, the acrobatic play, but in terms of yards after catch and yards over the middle, I mean, it's hard to argue with Demaryius Thomas. He's excelled under 3 quarterbacks, Tebow, Orton, Manning. When everyone says, the receiver is a dependent position, dependent on the quarterback, and that's true. But let's be clear that Demaryius Thomas has played well under 3 different quarterbacks, including one in Tebow, who was challenged to throw well.
Yeah,
so
you bring up an interesting point, Troy. He is a really sensitive kid, Demaryius Thomas. When Wes Welker was gone the first 4 games of last year, they put Demaryius in the slot at times, and he didn't like it there. And he dropped a lot of passes. He just wasn't happy. He also wasn't happy with his money situation. If this does drag on, I think you're absolutely right. If this does drag on, you almost have to be afraid of what you're going to see when he comes into training camp. Where his mindset's
well, I just
going to
think
be.
it's legitimate concern based on what we saw last year, that he was distracted by either playing a new position at times because of Welker's suspension and or the fact that he didn't get his contract done. And the contract thing, it's a weird deal in professional sports is, yes, he's going to make his money, $12.83 million, when he has to sign that by July 15th, and that's guaranteed money. But there's this feeling when you can't get a long-term contract done, the athlete begins to wonder, why don't they like me? What is it about them that makes them reluctant to commit? Even though it's almost always dollars, it's not usually other things, though Dez Bryant's is a little complicated by potential off-field issues. It's almost always dollars and cents, but the athlete begins to feel like he's not wanted. And in Demaryius' case, we've seen that when he's distracted, he doesn't play his best. It doesn't mean he's not a good player, Woody and Les, but a distracted Demaryius Thomas is not the DT that fans have grown accustomed to seeing.
Well, I would just say that if he signs, as someone who, unless and I are in the same situation, we both signed a lot of contracts, and I would say that once you sign the contract, you go, hey, it's time to get on with life. I don't think this is going to have the same kind of after effects because he's going to get his money. He is going to get. I would be more concerned, Troy, that with Pat Bowlen's thumb not on this franchise anymore, that Pat Bowlen would say, give him the money. Yeah, Pat Bowlen threw his money around during the Mike Shanahan period. He always was willing to put. I think they're under more restraints with Joe Ellis and John Elway running it because I think they're fearful of spending money of the family without it being their money.
And they're better at taking the emotion out of it as well.
You think there's any truth to that? That Pat Bowlen just. He put himself in financial dire straits on occasion because he threw out so much guaranteed bonus money.
I think that's a great point, Woody. I mean, there is only so much cash on hand, too. I mean, you involve signing bonuses and all those things come in at different levels when you're getting tickets, you're getting sponsorships. I mean, all that comes in at different rates and different the timing is different where Bowlen was always ready to mortgage everything to get guys in and press the envelope. And to your point, Woody, it's not Joe Ellis and John Elway's money. It's theirs. They have a budget to spend from, but ultimately Pat Bowlen could decide in 5 minutes, you know what, we're going to go $10 million more on the signing bonus. We're going to go $5 million more. And the Broncos have shown, at least this offseason, to be a little more conservative, a little more prudent, that they don't want to get caught into a situation where they've got 2 or 3 players making 30, 40% of the payroll. They're trying to clearly to avoid that. It'll change next year with Manning if he retires or they move on from him. That's certainly a huge chunk that would be gone. But the other argument here, Woody, and while I don't disagree with your Bowlen point, is which team has won by paying a receiver as the top paid player on their team? It won a Super Bowl. I mean, it just maybe Marvin Harrison in 07, and I don't think he was making more than Manning. It's just you don't typically win by overpaying at receiver. And so that's part of the issue here is in Kubiak's offense, how far are they willing to go for Demaryius Thomas? I think he's a great player. You need playmakers. But is there a line in the sand where you say we'd rather have a $10 million receiver with similar production than a $15 million receiver?